Welcome, viewers and listeners, to our penultimate episode of Dudes the Dead podcast for season 5.
Penultimate? Where did the season go?
I know, it's crazy. So this is episode 9, and tonight we're going to be talking about a new film, 2024, Late Night with the Devil. But before we get to our main feature for tonight, we are going to do our quick cuts. So do you want to kick us off with your first quick cut?
So this is an Australian film, 2023, directed by Josh Hale, called House of Iniquity. It's not very good. So the synopsis is a group of friends has to spend the night in an abandoned house. Sound familiar?
Is it found footage?
It's, yeah.
Okay.
That's the general gist of it, yeah.
Right.
Have you seen it?
No.
I wouldn't bother.
Just when you said the premise, I'm like, oh, that sounds like it could be a found footage
Yeah,
film.
it is pretty much.
Yeah.
There's just some, it's kind of weird but not explained. It's
Right.
like, okay, well, why is that happening? Or how does that happen? Or like, is there a temporal shift that makes this thing happen? Or like, so anyway.
What made you watch it in the first place?
I thought it would be better.
Oh, fair enough.
But
did you get it from a Rotten Tomato list, or you heard someone talk about it?
This one was just,
Cool cover.
was this on, Shudder, or was it on one of the other ones? It might have been on Prime. Anyway, yeah, I kind of read it and I looked at it and I thought, watched the preview or whatever. I thought, okay, like it was definitely, you got an indie vibe. There's not a lot of money here. But then I'm like, okay, well, there could be aspects of it that were good, but no, that's not.
I think giving our audience a heads up of films to avoid is just as valuable as ones they should watch. So
Yeah, fair. And I'd avoid this one, House of Iniquity. Cross it off your list.
Okay. That was inspiring. So my quick cut is Don't Worry, Darling, starring Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, and Chris Pine. And while her husband leaves home every day to work in a top secret facility, a young 1950s housewife begins to question her life when she notices strange behavior from the other wives in the neighborhood. Now, you can make the argument that this is not horror. I think it's a dark thriller with horror elements.
I would make that argument.
Yeah. But I still think it's worth watching. Really good performances.
Yeah.
It has a good sense of mystery. You know something's off, but you're not quite sure what.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoyed the ending and the revelation of what it ended up being. So
I liked it. I mean, Carrie and I saw that in the theaters. Her choice.
cool, yeah.
It wasn't one you needed to see in the theaters because it was more character driven.
Yeah.
But it was I thought good. I mean, I thought that Harry Styles took a lot of abuse, like that he's not a great actor or whatever, but I didn't think he was like that much worse than anybody else. Like I thought he was quite believable. I mean, he's not as good as Chris Pine or Florence Pugh.
Florence Pugh's amazing.
Yeah, she's just great.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a pretty high bar if you're a musician entering the world of acting. It's Florence Pugh is a pretty high bar to be, judging.
Totally.
But yeah, I thought it was a good film.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
It is.
It's maybe not quite horror, but I think it definitely has horror elements, so I'm okay recommending it here.
Good.
Yeah, so you haven't seen Don't Worry, Darling. It's streaming on Amazon, Netflix? Netflix.
Think it might be on Netflix.
I think it was Netflix, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, tonight we are going to talk about Late Night with the Devil.
On Halloween night, 1977, America gathered around for a live TV event that shocked the nation. What happened was real. What you are about to see is the recently discovered master tape of what went to air that night.
So we saw this in theaters together. So I wasn't able to go back and rewatch anything. So everything I'm saying tonight is from memory. I presume same for you. You didn't somehow watch it again. You didn't go back.
No. Yeah. I did write my notes when I came home.
Right.
As much as I could. I did fill them in the next day as well. But
yeah. So this is directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns. This has a 97% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and 82% audience score. So a better audience score than our last film we reviewed. It has a 7.5 on Internet Movie Database. Starring David Dastmalchian as Jack Delroy and Ingrid Torelli as Lily. So I had heard that this was getting a lot of buzz as potentially one of the better horror films of 2024. Some of my friends who are really into horror were very much anticipating this. What were your expectations going into it when we went to the theater to see it?
Yeah, I'd say pretty high because there's been a lot of hype about it.
Yeah. Which is always a little dangerous when you go in with high expectations.
Totally. I just want to be clear, too, about the sacrifice that we make going to the theater and not talking about the film when it's over.
It was tough.
So difficult not to turn to the person that you've just spent 2 hours with watching a film and talk about, oh, what did you think about this? Or what did you think about this? Especially when it's fresh in your mind. But we both kind of, okay, we won't say anything. We'll talk about it.
Especially when I give you a ride because we're actually in the car driving
totally.
home from the movie and
Totally.
can't talk about it.
Totally.
And you were trying pretty hard to get something out of me, and I think I didn't crack.
Now, I don't think you've seen this, but I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that this was inspired by the 92 British film called Ghost Watch,
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
which is a found footage, kind of early found footage film.
Yeah, so the premise of this film, it is a 1970s style talk show, late night talk show. They make a lot of references to Johnny Carson. And would you call it found footage? It's sort of meant to be a found footage film in that they are releasing this footage that was not
Yes.
released on television originally. But there are parts of this film that are arguably not meant to be found footage.
Like
All the backstage, because they have the television show itself, but then they have lots of intimate conversations behind the stage where it's just shot conventionally in black and white.
Yes.
But I don't know if it's actually meant to be found footage, that part of it. Did you think?
Well, I don't know how you would reconcile it otherwise.
Well, that's interesting, because I was going to say one complaint I had is that maybe I lost some immersion because you see the TV show footage.
Right.
But then it seemed like they just got lazy and just cut back to regular filmmaking in between.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't really interpret it that way. I just took it all as found footage.
Okay.
But I hear what you're saying, that if the broadcast footage wasn't actually broadcast, and that's the found footage, right? Was it 15 years later or something? It's supposed to be found it. I just don't know how the other stuff wouldn't be found footage as well.
I'd have to go back, and this is the problem with seeing it in theaters and not getting to watch it again, but I almost feel like they were cutting back and forth, like doing close-ups in dialogue.
Sure.
So it wasn't like a shaky cam that was like meant to be
No.
filming backstage footage.
Well, and the fact that it's in black and white sets it apart as well. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a tough one.
And the film also starts with almost like a 5-minute recap to kind of prime you for what you're about to see. Which, to be fair, some docuseries, I think, sort of do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I interpreted it. Was like so many found footage films, they contextualize what you're about to watch.
Yeah.
By talking about, like, he had never gone back to TV after that night.
Yeah.
And all these different things, right?
What did you think of that first 5-minute recap thing?
It had me a little bit worried, I have to be honest, because I thought, man, this is a bit cheesy.
Yeah.
And then once it got into the actual studio footage, then it felt to me like it kind of got its grounding.
Yeah, it seemed a bit like a necessary evil in that they kind of have to give you the background and the context, but the way it was executed felt a little bit
Yeah.
like it didn't jive with the whole film. It almost felt a bit cheap. Like, okay, here's all this background information. Okay, now watch our movie. So it was maybe a bit disjointed.
Yeah, I mean, I also wanted to mention, I think only because I'm a fan, and I saw an interview with David Dastmalchian, and he talks about this, where like how mind-blowing it is to have one of the biggest endorsements was from Stephen King.
Yeah. I think I watched that same interview.
Who just, Stephen King has said how, highly how much he liked this film.
And I've seen David Dastmalchian in a lot of different things, but
Yeah.
he tends to have smaller roles.
He does.
Like, I couldn't think of a film where he's like the front
me
and
neither.
center.
He's often these character parts in films.
Yeah. I mean, he has a very distinct look. I
Yeah.
feel like I recognize him from a bunch of different movies, but it was cool to see him as like the features.
Yes, I thought so too.
So, did you like it?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Did you love it?
I think I got close.
Okay.
I didn't. I mean, I'm not gushing about it, but I did really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I thought, I mean, we discussed this bit, I think, fairly briefly, but
And again, we'll do spoiler free for the first bit,
Yeah,
and then we'll jump
absolutely.
into spoilers. Yeah.
I mean, it's no, right off the bat that it's supposed to be a 70s late night TV show. Like even the commercial previews do that. So I felt like they absolutely nailed that. The vibe and the colors and the outfits and everything. I mean, I was 13-ish, 11, 12, somewhere in there. My math should be better than that because I was born in 66. So in 77, I was 11.
I was going to ask you that because I wasn't born until 83. Did you watch any late night 70s TV shows? Like Johnny Carson, did you watch?
Not late night, but my mom watched daytime TV all the time. So
Right.
I got the after school ones like Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas. What's the guy who was out of Chicago? Shoot. So these were days before the reality, the Jerry Springers of the world. There was, and I mean, I think Oprah was around, but she didn't have the popularity that she had. It was a bunch of white guys that were doing these talk shows. But my best friend in middle school, which I would have been around this age, used to stay up and watch Carson because he had a TV in his room.
Yeah.
And I remember being quite jealous of the TV in his room because
Would you happen to know what time that would come on at?
it was 11:30.
Oh, wow. So quite late.
It was late,
Right.
late, yeah. Because for one, I could never stay up that late because my mom was usually up past when we went to bed at that time. Like I had to. There was a TV show called SWAT. It was just a cop procedural kind of thing, but that came on at 9:00, and I had to get like permission to stay up and watch part of SWAT because I think it was an hour long maybe, so I couldn't stay up till 10, but I could watch a bit of it. But anyway, that's a long aside. But so I watched the after school ones. I was aware of Carson, but it was like my parents didn't even stay up. My dad was late sometimes, but he worked shift work mostly when I was a kid, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So he wasn't even home. But yeah, I knew that Carson was huge, and there was nothing like what we've got now with the Jimmys and Seth Meyers and whatever. Like there was none of that
O'Brien
stuff.
and-
Yeah, I mean, it was Johnny or nothing.
So do you think I think that was probably good to actually make the film feel more based in reality and that they were actually actively referencing, what's his name?
Johnny Carson.
Thank you, Johnny Carson the whole time.
And even, I mean, like the Nielsen ratings.
Yes.
At one point, he says, "Get this woman a ratings box" or whatever, because I think those were. My understanding is that they had like a box that they put in people's. It was a sample of the population, and they put these rating box next to your
Yes.
next to your TV changer. And I mean, this would have been before your time, probably. But I actually remember we had this big console TV which sat on the floor, like a big wooden box
wow.
that sat on the floor.
My grandparents had one.
Yeah, there you go. And I remember, only because we had family stories about this, I remember my mom saying that my dad had gone in to the bank without talking to my mom and had borrowed $500. That's a lot of money in the
that day,
early
yeah.
70s, right? Because I think we moved to our townhouse like in 1974.
That'd be like buying a MacBook Pro now or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Not that I would ever do that.
No, of course not.
Anyway, so he bought this big console TV that we had in our townhouse, and we actually had that until we moved out west. But so he had this TV, and I can remember, first of all, having to get up to change the channel on the TV, but then, and I don't remember the company. It might have been Rogers that came in at that point in Ontario. But anyway, we had a TV box that was connected with a cable to the television, and it had push buttons
Wow.
to actually change the channels, but it had like a 30-foot cord. So you could bring that to sit on the couch.
That's
and
old
then
school.
Change channels, and it had. I remember this because it had two banks of buttons that you could push, and then it had a little roller knob for actually tuning in some of the stations.
Which is so funny because it sounds so archaic right now, but I'm sure at the time that was like, oh my, look what you can do. This is amazing.
Well, and it was amazing to me because I was so used to getting up to change the
knob,
channel,
yeah,
the
that's what I
knob.
remember doing too. Yeah.
So, but of course, I knew people already at that time, like late 70s, early 80s, who had remotes for their TV. Like they had bigger TVs. There was still is it CRT units, the ones that with so they still had those kind of TVs. But I had, and sorry, this is a long-winded thing, but I had a weird thing happen to me. Like this is going back about 20 years now. But I got my first kind of flat screen TV, and I still had one of those old school like big TVs. And I remember taking it to a local secondhand store, and they wouldn't take it.
Wow.
And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I just got a flat screen because I remember them telling me, yeah, we don't take those anywhere. Everybody wants a flat screen. I'm like, yeah, well, I want a gold toilet, but it's not going to happen. So
They probably just take up so much space.
yeah,
and,
I think that's what it was. So it really irked me. It was like, this is a really good TV that still works and still has life.
Yeah, because before the flat screens, there was just monstrous big screens.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Anyway, that was a long-winded thing, but
So I was born in the 80s, so I didn't watch any late night 70s TV, but I watched enough reruns of TV shows in the 80s from the 70s that this felt very authentic, though. Like they really captured the 70s television and the 70s feel,
Totally.
like cutting to commercial and the sensibilities. So I thought the film was a breath of fresh air for sure. This idea of we're going to have like a demonic possession story and do it on a 70s late night TV show.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that before.
no, I liked the fact that it was more. I like the fact that they built in the skepticism
By having the skeptic
Yes.
character, for sure.
because I think he functions a little bit like us, right?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like, the Greek chorus in Greek theater where they're expressing lines that probably the audience is thinking or wanting to say or whatever. And I felt that was the same thing with this one. They set it up so that, he's saying everything that you're thinking, right?
Especially with the psychic guy.
Yeah.
I'm getting a P. Is it
Yeah.
a Peter, a Paul? And like that's such a, I don't know, like a tired
Absolutely.
routine. And so the fact that he calls it out made it pretty cool.
Well, it's so debunked now, that idea of how they play on is it Peterson? No, Peterman. Oh yeah, Peterman, that's what it was. So, I mean, when you break that kind of, when you break that down, what they're doing and how they're either watching body language or like they revealed later in the film, the skeptic was talking to the two women that he had, gleaned
Yes.
information from. And of course, they were pre-screened and all these different things. And in the moment, I have no doubt that the person being manipulated doesn't recognize the manipulation because it's emotional. And so when the emotion kicks in, the logical part of your brain is not saying, oh yeah, but I answered questions in the lobby before we came in. And yet, so you're wanting to believe that this person is doing what they claim to be doing.
For sure. And then it functions to add authenticity to the real horror when the skeptic is even like, oh, what's going on here? Or the guy who he debunks, but then you start to see him do other things like, oh, okay, this is getting interesting. So I get why they had, what was his name?
They called him Carr.
No, sorry, the psychic dude, like Cosmo or
Yeah, I thought they
Costu, or anyways, it doesn't matter. But they had this psychic character. So the cool thing, it functions like you were actually watching an episode of late night TV, and that they don't jump straight into the demonic possession guest. They go through almost like the whole show.
Yeah.
Even the acts that you're maybe not as invested in, which I think is both a pro and a con, which we can talk about maybe more in the spoilers.
Sure. Carmichael Haig.
Yeah.
That was the guy's name.
But did that work for you then? Did you like the whole scene with the psychic?
I don't know if I liked it, but I felt it was necessary because I don't know if you remember this. He was on a lot of these shows. The Amazing Kreskin. Did you ever?
Do you think that's what that was a reference to?
Well, I just think there were lots of those kinds of characters around in this time, and Kreskin, I know. So the one thing that clued me in, the skeptic talked about people bending spoons and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty, typical fare for that kind of performance. And Kreskin did all that kind of stuff. I mean, he was always on. And mind you, I mean, the production value of that stuff, I remember when Carrie and I went to Vegas years ago and we saw Chris Angel.
Oh, yeah.
Who was really popular on television at the time. And it's pretty crazy what they can do. Like, you're live in the audience. And it's like, how did he do that? You know it's not real. Like, it's not magic.
No. But it's more impressive than I get a Peter.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, there's I think what I think was interesting about that is that it's functioning on a number of levels. One is just that's the kind of person they had on those talk shows, but you also get a sense of people's tolerance for shenanigans. Like, oh, okay, some people believe the psychic and some people don't, and then you've got the skeptic, Carmichael Haig, who used to be a con man, and now he's turned.
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting too, because he kind of knows the inside of those things.
And he's willing to expose all
Yes.
the secrets. And so it's interesting. Like, I like this film and I appreciate the novelty of it because it's doing something different with the talk show format. But then I also feel like the talk show format introduces some limitations and maybe ultimately some problems that take away from the film a little bit. I was engaged the whole time.
Yeah.
But I was left with a few critiques.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say in the end I loved it, and I for sure don't know if I would say that this is going to be like the best horror film of the year.
Yeah, I would struggle to say that because it didn't blow my socks off.
Yeah, part of that might be expectations, and maybe that's not fair. But
like when I went to see Talk to Me, I had seen a preview, and it didn't disappoint.
right, and that was getting a lot of buzz too. Like, oh, this is the scariest
Totally.
movie of the year. And I agree, and it lived up. And same with When Evil Lurks.
Yes,
Yeah.
whereas something like Exorcist Believer was just like, no thanks.
Yeah.
But I'm not putting this in the same category. I do think this is a strong film, but I would agree with some of the critics that I've read and heard saying it didn't live up to the hype that's being created around it.
I think I agree with that. I think I ultimately left feeling a bit disappointed.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot I do appreciate about it.
Now, did you look up? I found this really interesting. Did you look up Abraxas, the demon?
I knew that was the demon, and I did not look it up though to see if it was a real cult.
So apparently,
This isn't spoilers, I guess.
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, it's supposed to be about possession, so you
Fair
know
enough.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Abraxas is a mystical word, probably Gnostic or Kabbalistic, which conveys grammatically, which I don't really know, the number 365 and is connected with the solar cycle. The word is also associated with the highest Gnostic deity and eventually became the name of a demon in occultism. But it's also, according to some, the god of gods.
Oh, wow.
So it's a demon to some and a god to others.
Right. You got the sense that whatever it is very powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like pretty
absolutely.
high in the hierarchy. Yeah. That's cool. And also, I don't think it's a spoiler, but maybe it is. I'll wait.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if there's anything. We talked about the 70s thing. Now, did you come across? I came across something that talked about the usage of AI.
Yeah, I was going to say that for the end.
Oh, okay.
Although I guess, did we talk about that in non-spoiler?
It's a bit controversial.
That's true, and it's not a spoiler, so.
No.
Yeah, so I also came across that. That seems to be one of the things that's really getting attached to this film is the controversy of using AI. Apparently they only use AI for, have like the title cards in between
Yeah.
scenes. They used it for like 3 of them. So some of the art, Like there was like the owl thing.
Oh, that's right.
Like
but-
some of those visuals that would pop up. I think 3 of them they had AI.
So what's the controversy? I don't really get what the
I think the controversy is that like this independent film, which is supposed to kind of be symbolic
Okay.
of indie filmmaking,
Didn't
is
use-
then using the thing that people think is going to be like the death
Gotcha.
of indie film. So,
Yeah.
but I don't.
That's a bit of a slippery slope. I think that like it's one thing I think to use AI to either do something like CG, to do something that you can't do practically, or to just make it easier to do some things in production. Like I don't have an issue with that. Replacing actors, yeah, I have an issue with. But
Then have you been to Save on Foods and have you ever used the self checkout?
yeah.
And that's the thing, right? So that's the exact same thing. Like
Yeah.
you're using a self checkout, which used to be somebody's job.
Yeah.
They're now Amazon is using drones to deliver things, which
Yeah.
used to be someone's job. I feel like the story of humanity is we invent new technologies that unfortunately replace human labor.
Yeah.
And
But we seem to have survived without the cotton gin or any of those other machines that replaced human beings in the Industrial Revolution.
yeah,
So I don't know how much I buy the argument that all of a sudden these things are going to replace us all, because it's never happened.
yeah, it was interesting. I was at a Reel to Reel film festival in Vancouver this
Okay.
week,
Yeah.
and I was talking to one of the guys who worked for an animation studio.
Ah, okay.
And I asked him about AI. He's like, "Oh no, we're not worried about AI right now." He's like, "AI is so far away. Like we
Yeah.
actually like AI because it replaces all the boring things I have to do in my job, but we are nowhere near the point of like AI actually
Totally.
taking over an animator's job." I get the concern, and I do think we need to be careful about using AI. But people who are like boycotting this film and like
Yeah.
crapping all over them, where if you've ever used a self checkout at a grocery store, then or you used any number of technologies, like when Google came out, and we've just seen so much technological advancement. Like Amazon warehouses now, I guess, are almost fully automated by things that used to be people. So it's hard to like crap on them for using AI for 3 little scenes.
Yeah.
And you could make the argument too that indie filmmakers have a limited budget. And so if them using AI to offload a few smaller
I
jobs
agree.
allows them to make their project versus not being able to do it because they don't have the funds.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bit of a because I'm totally all over that argument. Like, I have a bit of an issue with, a major studio saying, "Well, yeah, we've got this $400 million budget, but we can't make this without AI."
Yeah.
Whereas an indie film that might have $1 million budget, if they were lucky, anything that can help you cut corners and save a bit of money is going to be worth it to you, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
And I get it. Like it is a tough time for artists, I guess, when
Yeah.
AI can just auto-generate those things. So I think it's worth having the discussion, and I could see
Yeah. Totally.
being concerned about it, but I just don't know if it's fair to like boycott this film because they used AI for like 3 little images.
Yeah, I didn't understand. That's why I asked the question, because I saw that there was a controversy around it. I'm like, okay, I didn't see enough, or it didn't seem obvious to me what the AI things were. So I didn't see what the controversy was, but that's kind of helpful, I think.
Actually, so in the comments for this video, if you're watching on YouTube, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this controversy in AI. And do you think it's a problem, or is it unfair to attack the directors here or the filmmakers for using AI?
And if you decide to jump in on that, I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to know what you think, like where you draw the line, right? Like I've said, okay, well, I don't have an issue with AI being used for, certain artistic things, but I do have an issue with it when you're replacing somebody's voice or replacing somebody's image or doing anything that the real person could do.
Yes.
Then I would say, yeah, that's my line in the sand. And when my understanding is better, that line might move for me. But right now, that's like anything technical. I know there's lots of human beings who do those technical things, but I don't have an issue so much if it's technical. But if it's performance related, then I definitely don't see AI as something that we should be using.
Yeah.
So, do you think that so we talked last episode about the metaphorical level that the movie was operating on.
Yep.
I definitely see that here as well. I mean,
Interesting.
so-
yes, yeah, I think I know what you're referring to.
Okay, so do you see that as well in this film?
I think so. That might be something to talk more about
In spoilers?
in spoilers.
Yeah, okay.
But I would say like that's the difference between stop motion and this movie is like you might have a message in both cases, have some metaphorical layers in both, but this one was way more engaging.
Yeah, it stands
way
alone.
more invested in
Yeah.
what was happening and had lots of other elements.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
it wasn't just relying on that, but that's like an extra nice little layer. I want to give a shout out to Ingrid Torelli, who was the girl.
Oh yeah, she was creepy.
She blew my
Yeah.
socks off. I was like, and I think my disappointment in the end is like, I wanted more of that, and I didn't get enough of that, and I
Okay.
was almost disappointed. Like, really, like we're not going to get more, and so like having to go through the motions of like walking through the entire talk show to get to her when we could have had a whole movie
Yeah.
with her, to the point where like, oh man, I like. There's so many of those demonic possession movies now with like girls getting possessed. It's pretty overdone.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to outcompete like the original Exorcist, it's pretty tough. But I thought her performance was so compelling and so unsettling and creepy. Like, okay, I would watch another like
Yeah.
demonic possession girl movie with you because I thought she was awesome.
Now that you mention that, I just started trying to think, can I think other than The Omen of a possession with a male?
Yeah. Is the second Conjuring film the something man? What do they call him? Is that a boy? I mean, for sure, overwhelmingly, it's little girls.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there are not many instances. I think there's one or two. I may even be wrong about that, but for some reason, The Conjuring 2 is coming to mind. But I can't remember.
And there's the first Omen coming out this year, which we are hoping to see.
And that one's a girl too, I think.
It is.
So
Okay, so do we want to jump into spoilers?
we probably have to. I
Yeah,
think,
I
at
think
this
we
rate.
do.
Would you agree with that assessment of her?
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was fantastic.
Like
And
I think David Desmalchian is good. He's solid.
yeah.
But maybe the range of his character is a bit limited. Like I wasn't like he was amazing. He blew me away. Like,
Yeah.
the performance that blew me away was Ingrid Torelli, and I thought David Desmalchian was really good. But it wasn't his performance that made the movie. I actually thought it was more hers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair.
But she's given more to work with, I guess, in terms of like a range.
So what's your final word on this one? Do you recommend or not?
So I do recommend it, and I do ultimately like it. I was a bit disappointed. I don't think it reaches like the top heights I was
Yeah.
hoping it would, and we'll talk in the spoilers about some things that detracted from it. But it's still a very good film. It's absolutely worth watching. It's very engaging. It's a really good. I think you and I both said it feels like a. We've been talking about a lot of time capsule films.
Yeah.
And this does feel like it captures that like 1970s talk show thing very well. And I think she is really good, and I wish we could see more of that. So I'd recommend. How about you?
Yeah, I'm a recommend as well. I think I my like might have exceeded yours, because I think it's a strong film, strong performances. I definitely, just the vibe of the film and that late 70s, 80s satanic panic
Yeah.
thing that was like it's a very palpable moment in time, and I think it's also just really interesting. Like I'm very interested. I probably should have done a sociology degree at some point, but I'm very interested in sort of periods of human history and how it impacts like so many things that are going on. But if you think 1977, you've got, disco and punk and, cocaine is everywhere. And you've got like places like Studio 54 in New York and like just such a really interesting time. Just really interesting time. And to know that, there's these things going on, but there's also all this other stuff swirling around it just makes it that much more interesting to me. So I do recommend it. I think I liked it a little bit more than you, and I do think it will warrant another watch at some point for me.
I would just temper your expectations a little bit if you're hearing like this is the best film of the year.
Yeah, and if you're hearing the hype, maybe don't, if you can, avoid a preview or whatever and kind of go in blind and take the movie for what it is as opposed to what people think it should be or what people are telling you it is or, you know, whatever. Okay, so what were your, so spoilers.
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
What were some of your niggles then?
The thing that really almost destroyed it for me was what I thought was awful CGI at the end. The electricity and the head explosion, the shocking and the little blue thing. Like, I guess were they trying to make it look like CG from the 70s?
I don't know.
Like, to me, I don't like CGI at the best of times. And I just like, I felt like they were building a lot of good things, and I was really excited to see what the payoff was. And when the payoff was like her head exploding into a ball of electricity and her like shocking people, I was just like, that's not what I wanted. And I was disappointed.
So are you critical of that? I get what you're saying. But are you critical because you think it could have been done better if it were practical?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, I just find CG pulls me out, especially when it doesn't look very real.
But how would they do that practically?
Well, I just think they should have not gone with electricity or like, you know, like, and that's not what I associate with demonic possession, right? Like, the more like when she vomits at the beginning on the guy's jacket, like, okay, that's kind of what I see in the creepy face. And like, that was all working for me. And then when she just that just came out of left field, I just didn't like it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, interesting your reaction to that, because I didn't have that visceral reaction to CGI.
No.
And I kind of thought, like, it didn't take me out of the film at all. And I just thought, well, I mean, it made sense to me because you're in a studio with all this electricity and all this. That's your weapon. That's what you can draw from. That's what's going to...
You didn't think it looked bad? Like the blue line? Like, does electricity do that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It just...
I guess I just didn't question it.
Like, I felt like it was trying so hard to be grounded in reality the whole film.
Right.
And then to, like, suddenly have this burst of bad-looking CGI at the end. I was like, you've just kind of undone this, like, sense of realism. Like, you're referencing Johnny Carson, you know, like, the cutting to... Like, everything felt like this was a real TV show. And then when they did that, I'm like, it just really took me out of it.
I'd be curious to know if you ever watch the 92 Ghost Watch.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
Because it's not the same, but has some similarities in the sense of it's supposed to be like a found footage thing. And some of it's taking place in a studio, television studio. So there's that connection, but some of it's also taking place outside of the studio and people are reacting.
Yeah, this is a common pet peeve for me. I've had so many horror movies ruined where the CGI doesn't work, and then I'm like, it just takes me out of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I do. There are some times where I notice that. I think your sensitivity level is higher for that than mine is. And that could just be because you're more attuned to it. Maybe because I'm older, I'm just used to seeing bad films. But to be fair though, I mean, in the old days, it used to be practical. It didn't have CGI. So you would just be stuck with bad practical effects if they were that at all. Like, okay, here's a perfect example of things that took me out of a film.
Yep.
The Evil Dead with the like oatmeal and stuff that comes out of that was I was completely done, and that's a practical effect. It wasn't CGI,
right?
But I was like, okay, what is supposed to be happening here? It totally looks like oatmeal. Why is it oatmeal?
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things typically that will take me out, because I don't know what electricity looks like when it's zinging around a room.
Yeah.
I was willing to suspend my disbelief. Like,
yeah, maybe I have a very narrow idea of what like demons do or demonic possession is, and it doesn't involve
your
like
mind.
Exploding heads of electricity.
Yeah.
I also feel like tonally, when I want demonic possession, I feel like I want it to just be super dark, and kind of unrelenting. And I feel like the demonic possession films that work for me are always super dark, like Hereditary or The Conjuring or The Exorcist. And this one has like goofy kind of humor throughout, which makes sense for the 1970s talk show.
Yes.
But then to me, that kind of doesn't jive super well with like demonic possession. So though it was kind of unsettling, it didn't build the same sense of atmosphere and dread going into it, that the payoff maybe wasn't quite there the same as in a film that's totally dedicated and all in on creating this sense of like pure evil and dread. Although she was amazing. Like she did a really good job of like being convincing.
I mean, I think because you had that skeptic character who was often, giving sort of one-liners or, taking a strip off somebody, that has the potential, I guess, to take you out of it. I think there's that seesaw of the reality of a TV show, and it was live, supposed to be that night. So there are things that you can't, change or do. But yeah, I mean, I understand that.
But her performance, like her creepy, the way she was kind of like awkwardly happy, like to me that was convincing and like, that's very realistic to me. Someone who maybe does have multiple personality disorder might present that way, and maybe it's just my own taste.
I mean, I mentioned earlier before the spoiler section, about this operating on a metaphorical level, which I thought there's the desperation of him as a person, trying to save his career, save his show, and it's kind of
willing to like do a deal with the devil to
it's very much
like a
Faustian bargain for sure. Although, I mean, you never know for sure. It's only intimated or implied that okay, well, he's at this Masonic lodge or whatever.
That was cool.
So the idea being, because this is, I think, has come up in a number of Hollywood films, but I mean, Eyes Wide Shut is similar to this, right? There's.
Do you believe in those? Like you hear this conspiracy that I don't know if it's like a deep state thing. I mean, there's the ridiculous like Pizzagate thing, but there's like all the elites and the government people, and they meet at these houses and have like orgies and these rituals, and
it's super interesting because I don't want to come off as some flaky like conspiracy theorist. However, I just saw a clip from George Carlin where he was on a talk show, and he was the naysayer in the group, but they were trying to debunk him. And this, one guy was talking about conspiracy theories, and Carlin's response was, you don't have to have a conspiracy when you've got a bunch of people with the same common interest. They don't need to ask each other what's in their best interest. They just know. And so I say that because even though I don't believe in conspiracies, do I believe that there are powerful groups of probably almost exclusively men who know what's good for them and manipulate events so that it stays good for them? Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
It seems like where there's smoke, there's fire. Like I've heard enough of these stories of like
it's got to be something.
Freemasons or like some kind of secret club with some kind of rituals, how dark it gets, or, I'm sure some of that is exaggerated, but I thought it was cool that they wove that in, but it wasn't too overt or in your face. It was kind of implied.
Totally.
Like even the Abraxas or whatever, the devil's like, oh, we've met before. He's like, no, we haven't.
Yeah.
And then it was those things.
Yeah.
That was cool. Like I really appreciated how they handled that.
Now, what about the, how will I articulate this? The break from reality at the end of the film, where you think he's with someone, with his wife, who's deceased, but he's actually not with her. He's with somebody else.
Yeah. So did you get the sense that he was being manipulated by her or the demon? That's how I read it in that case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because so we're on the same page. Like he does. We are in the spoiler section.
Yes.
He does kill her at the end.
I think so.
Yeah, he stabs her or whatever. But I
think
felt
he was being manipulated and hallucinating.
Yes.
Again, unlike stop motion where it was hard to tell, in this case I feel like there's enough reason to believe that that was the case and
I think
evidence
so.
for that you can
Yeah.
make the argument, and it works.
I think so. And I liked that. I mean, because that's, to me, that's maybe part and parcel for any demonic possession film, is that you're being manipulated. What
Yes.
seems to be real is not real.
And they use your weakness against you.
Absolutely.
So like Damien's guilt with his mother in The Exorcist, like the devil preys on that. And in this, it's like the guilt with him and
Yeah.
his girlfriend, and maybe the stuff that he had done at these.
Well, not only that, but I got the sense that maybe he wasn't the best husband in the world.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. He was having an affair with the psychiatrist while he was with her.
That's what I get.
They seem to imply that, I thought.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I got from it. And then, his wife being ill with cancer, and they had her on his show.
Yeah.
And all the rest of it. And yeah, I just feel like there was a lot of reality there around the harshness of the ratings games. And yeah, it could be the end of your career if you start a show and you just can't maintain those ratings. Well, they're going to can you, right?
Yeah,
They're going to
yeah.
cancel you. So, and of course, in those days, I think it wasn't until, and I could be mistaken because this isn't kind of like my forte, but I really feel like if you look at film, it was probably like the 30s, 40s, and maybe even into the 50s and later that it was the studios that were in control, right? They contracted the actors. They had to have, a 5-film contract or whatever, and they could tell them what needed to be done and so on and so on. In television, I feel it was the same, that the studios were in control. They had a lot of power, probably until the 90s. And I'm thinking about Friends, when there was that big controversy about them each getting $1 million per episode because, and I don't remember who it was, probably Jennifer Aniston, or was offered the big money, but they refused to do it unless everybody got paid.
Right.
And because the show was so popular, they couldn't cancel it.
Yeah. Although wouldn't that be true for like Johnny Carson? Like for the late night where the person is the show, they probably wield more power, maybe?
In Carson's case, I think you might be right because,
Yeah.
I mean, so I think 30 years he was on the late night show.
Yeah.
I think he started in 1962. Because I did some reading about Carson. I think Jack Parr, who was the original host, did 57 to 62, and Carson did 62, I think, to 92.
Wow.
Now, as the show went on, that's where you got the guest hosts and things like that, because Carson basically just said something, I don't want to work this much. I don't want to work every night. Like I think he was doing 3 nights a week or something, probably still making a ridiculous amount of money. But that's how, people like Seinfeld
Yes.
and different people
a good example.
hosted The Tonight Show, right? Because Carson didn't want to work every night.
So you said you had niggles, maybe? Or that you didn't love it? Is there anything that you would point to that didn't work for you?
Yeah, good question.
Sounds like you don't share my critiques.
Well, no, not the ones that you've mentioned so far. I didn't really have a lot of critiques. I would say probably I wasn't crazy about the opening. The contextualizing the backdrop of, his career and so on. I don't know if, was there another way that you could have done that? Maybe. But on the positive side, I like how they did it and got it out of the way. And then there was no flashbacks. There was nothing to tell us about, what had happened before.
Did you feel like you got enough of her?
Well-
Ingrid Torelli, I just felt like, oh, she's so good. And it didn't just feel like she was in the movie that much. I would love to see a sequel to this where it's all something to do with her.
But arguably, and maybe not for you, arguably though, wouldn't you, if you're oversaturated with a character, is that better than wanting more?
But there could be a balance between those two
Yeah,
extremes.
yeah, there could be.
So I feel like I wanted more, but I wanted more. And you could still get more without being oversaturated.
Yeah.
And she seemed talented enough and dynamic enough. I feel like she could do such, because there's so many of these movies that just suck.
Yeah.
And I feel like, oh, if you got her in it, it might be really good.
Well,
You can even keep it in this universe with her being the same character. I feel like there was a lot to explore
for sure.
with her backstory or where she goes after this. Or
Now that's something, yes, that's something that I think could have been more fleshed out. Now the movie was, I thought, a good runtime,
Yep.
but I wonder if there could have been a little bit more about her life and her backstory with this cult or whatever. You know, again, there's flip sides, right? Like, I mean, the other side to that would be like, well, do you really need it? Or can we imagine things more horrible than they could have showed us about her life? Probably. So, do we need to have that? Probably not. But a little bit of a nod to what life might have been like, more so, would have been interesting. And maybe, you know, something about, well, like, why her? Why is she the one that survives?
Yeah. It's kind of like Mia Goth in X.
Yeah.
It's like she was so good. It's like, okay, let's make Pearl. Then we'll make Maxine.
Yeah.
I feel like, oh yeah, you could maybe do something similar here.
I'm so looking forward to Maxine.
Yeah, me
actually.
too.
I might have to rewatch Pearl.
But these are the things that, for me, just kept it from being like amazing. But I still think overall the movie is
Okay.
very good.
Yeah, yeah,
These
yeah.
are sort of nitpicks. The CG thing pissed me off, but everything else is kind of a nitpick.
Yeah, I just don't feel like I had the same level of dissatisfaction with the things that you did. I mean, I didn't like, you know, the Ed McMahon kind of character, the laughing boy
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Did you like the scene with the hypnosis? With the worms and stuff?
I don't know. That one didn't come off very well for me.
Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, I get what they were trying to do, but
Like hypnotizing the audience,
yeah,
and then you fall for it, then you realize it's not real.
I mean, I don't believe in mass hypnosis, so that it stretches credulity for me. I do believe that somebody can be a single person can be hypnotized and maybe put in a different state of being. I don't think you can do that with a mass of people.
No,
I-
they're almost trying to imitate that phenomenon by making you think something was real that wasn't.
Yeah.
Did you like the practical effects, like the worms coming out of his stomach and stuff?
Yeah, like I thought all that was good. And I mean, you already alluded to the, regurgitation scene. I mean, I always find those very disturbing, that black tar-like substance that comes. And I suppose, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like maybe that's the rotten thing inside you because it's used so much. But yeah, like for me, there just wasn't, there wasn't anything that would make me not watch it again.
Yeah.
Like and definitely I would be looking forward to seeing it again and seeing what I missed.
So we talked about this earlier. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So if we were doing a top 10 found footage list, would you characterize this as found footage? Would you put this in the found footage genre?
It's not the same as a typical quote unquote found footage film, but considering some of the things that are classed as found footage,
Yeah.
I would have to say that this falls in. It just isn't a Blair Witch found footage film.
Yeah.
But
Which apparently they're rebooting.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So maybe the longer answer to your question is I don't know exactly. I think I would put it in a found footage.
I think ultimately I would have
yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, I don't have anything else in my notes, and since I don't have as many complaints as you do about this film,
I still recommend it. I still
Yeah,
think it's worth
yeah.
going to theaters to see it. I'd be curious if anyone else had the same reaction to the CGI, but
I'm curious to see, like, because it had limited runs, but there's been all this hype. Like, are they going to extend those runs, or are they going to try to re-release it at some point? Or
Because Hero's only in theaters for maybe 7 days.
yeah, I don't even know it's even here a week. Yeah. So there you go.
This will be available to stream soon, though, right?
My understanding, or at least what I saw online, was that this is going to be a Shudder exclusive, and I think
It actually did the duh-duh, like the Shudder
did.
thing in theaters, which I'd never seen before.
I'd never seen that, and
Yeah.
I think that this might be, because if you watch any of the streaming services, there's exclusive content on there, but I think this might have been kind of like, was it Roma that was a Netflix release that won an Oscar?
Yeah.
I think this is like in-house Shudder film. So I think it's an exclusive for Shudder. And so I think they're going to be streaming it. At least my understanding is as of April 19th. But whether that happens here, we've got another week or so. We're April 13th today.
Yeah.
So we'll find out in the next week or so whether or not that's going to end up on Shudder.
So believe it or not, when they have one more episode proper in
I know,
season
it's
5.
crazy. We're going to do
episode 10, and that's going to be Sinister.
Yes, we've talked about this for a long time, and I don't know why Sinister hasn't made it on our list before now, but we both just kind of had this epiphany, like, we both love this film. Why don't we do Sinister? So I'm looking forward. I think I've probably seen it 3 times already, but I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Me too, I think. And we will have a top 10 at the end of the season, like every other season.
But there's a twist.
More on that next episode, though.
What a twist! There you go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you for watching / listening, and
And we'll see you in the aisles.